Hello and welcome back. This is our annual look at the goaltending position, and boy, last year was absolutely nuts for goaltending, and that will impact this strategy. Now in this video, I'll walk you through a recap of what happened last year. I'll give you two separate strategies that you can use, Elite G1s, value targets, and much more. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Now first off, if you're new here, why should you listen to me at all? Who the hell am I? This is my fantasy performance going back over 15 years, and you can see how mid I was until about 2018-2019 when I started to fade goalies. Specifically, I stopped drafting them in the early rounds on the advice of Boomer Gordon on NHL radio, and boy did that work like a charm. I'm now a 974 diamond ranked player and have finally won a few championships in the last few years, so if you're new to fantasy or if you're looking to drastically improve your team, this is the first place to start. Now, if you want more insight into the background of what makes this strategy work, I've done quite a bit of analysis on this, and you can find most of it in these videos, which are all available on the channel, and I'll link them in the description below. Now, the first piece of data we're going to look at today is being taken straight from that video on the bottom right, the 22-23 season recap video, and it looks like this. So this is the recap of the goaltending position from 22-23, and the data was very clear. Don't pick a goalie before the 6th round, and if you wait until after the 6th round, you should be safe. You can see that 70% of the goalies in the first 6 rounds were labeled as disappointing. Now, disappointing was classified as a player who was drafted at a certain ADP, and their N rank was at least 15 spots lower. So if the gap was between 0 and 15, they were relatively similar. If their N rank was better than their ADP, they were improved. So that's how they were classified, and you can see here, the percentage of skaters in the first 6 rounds who were disappointing was about 51%, which is lending credence to the fact that in the data draft strategy, we say you cannot swing and miss in the first 6 rounds of your draft. You have to pick guys who are going to be, safe bets, not necessarily taking on risk, but you definitely don't want to do that with goaltending. Now, the problem was the 23-24 season was even crazier for goaltending in general. And when we look at this same analysis from last year, we see that non-disappointing in the first 6 rounds, there's a couple of guys. There's Shesterkin and Hellebuyck. Now, there's obviously Swayman, Saros, Bobrovsky. Those are guys who are non-disappointing in the first couple rounds, but we'll get back to them in a minute. So what you notice here is this pocket of despair right around the 7th round range. So you got Vanacek, Samsonov, Devin Levi, Korpisalo, Jari, Marc-Andre Fleury. Very risky picks. Guys who did not have a proven track record. Jari kind of did. Fleury did at times, but not necessarily in recent memory. And a lot of these guys obviously did not work out. The other thing you notice is this pit of despair at the top. So Sorokin didn't play well. Vasilevsky was terrible. Ottinger didn't have his best season. Ullmark was okay, but not necessarily holding up his end of the value in terms of being a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick. And Georgiev was disappointing as well. So 60% of the goalies taken in the first 6 rounds were disappointing. That's a little bit better than the 70% in 22-23, but 66.6% of the goalies taken in the first 8 rounds were disappointing. Now, when you compare that to after that point, so 52.6% of the goalies taken after round 8 were also disappointing, but that's a little bit better than what you get before the first 9 rounds. So a little bit better if you fade goalies past the 9th round. But the other thing to take notice of is these rounds here, 4, 10, 11, and 13, where no disappointing goalies were had. And you have Hellebuyck here, Swayman here. These were the guys in the 4th round. And then Saros was also a 4th round pick there. And then you also had a little bit later on, round 10, I believe, was Demko and Skinner. And then round 11 was Kochetkov and Markstrom. And then round 13, I believe, was Hill and UPL. So one of the things that I noticed as I was looking at this is the guys who all were improved or similar have one thing in common, most of them. A couple of them don't, but most of them played for good defensive teams. So you'll notice Shesterkin, he's got a good defensive team. Hellebuyck was on a really good defense. Swayman, Bobrovsky, they had a really excellent defense in Florida. Demko, Vancouver's defense improved markedly last year. You had Skinner. They were terrible off the bat, but then once the coaching change came in, they were actually a really good defensive team. Kochetkov, obviously the Canes have been really good defensively historically. Markstrom had a good defense in front of him until the deadline. They traded off a bunch of assets. They were not necessarily a great defensive team year-round. Adin Hill had a good defense in front of him. UPL is kind of an outlier here. He had a great season on his own. And then Logan Thompson playing for Vegas, also a good defensive team. Binnington, it's a little bit up in the air. I wouldn't necessarily classify St. Louis as a good defensive team anymore, but Varlamov, they've typically been a good defensive team, and Cam Talbot played for LA. They were a very good defensive team. So keep that in mind as we look at value targets later in the video. But up next, we'll take a look at the Elite G1s. Who are they? You can see a bunch of their names here, and we'll start with this. So these are the top 20 rankings over the last 3 years on the Data Draft Goalie Hub, which we'll look at later, and you can find a link to this in the Patreon link in the description below. Now, only 2 goalies have ended up in the top 10 of each of these past 3 seasons. You can see them here, Connor Hellebuyck and Igor Shesterkin. Hellebuyck going from 6 to 3 to 1, which is excellent to see if you've been drafting him. Last year, I believe he was going in the mid-30s, and this year he's going in the mid-20s, so you're going to have to pay a premium for that, and there really is only one place to go, and that's down, although you do see Saros at the top of this list. Now, this takes into account total saves. This 22-23, obviously Linus Ullmark was the #1 goaltender in fantasy that year, but when you take in total saves, Saros had a crap load of volume that year, so that is why he's at the top of this list. But Ullmark was obviously the best goaltender in fantasy for a lot of you out there. But with that said, Hellebuyck and Shesterkin are the 2 guys that you can reliably count on if you spend that top pick, that 2nd or 3rd round pick, maybe a 4th round pick if you're lucky. That's who you can rely on to be really good year over year, and maybe even if they are slightly disappointing, they're still going to hold up their end of the bargain. But there are a few other goalies who make multiple appearances on this list, and that's these guys. So 6 goalies have appeared in the top 10, 2 out of the last 3 seasons. Saros, you can see #1, 2 of these seasons, and then dropped off to 16. You got Vasilevsky, 2 of these seasons, dropped off last year, not even on this list. You've got Bobrovsky, who started here, was off the list and came back at #2. You've got Demko. A lot of this is injury related with Demko. You've got Sorokin, Ottinger, so a lot of the guys that you would expect. Another guy to take note of is Jeremy Swayman. He was 11th in 22-23 by this metric, and then 7th last year. So you could put him in this top 10, Elite G1 list. And obviously now he's a starter, so he's going to be drafted high. So he should be one of those Elite G1s. And if you count Swayman, that makes 9 Elite G1s that you can usually rely on for good goaltending performance. Now, the other way to look at this is the random goalies that are in the top 10 each year. So you look at Ville Husso, pretty random that he's there. Tristan Jarry, not as random, but kind of random. Anton Forsberg, completely random in the top 10. You also have Gustafsson and Samsonov here in the top 10 in 22-23. Then this past year, you've got Joey Decord coming out of nowhere. He's at #5. You've got Connor Ingram coming out of nowhere, Cam Talbot. So a lot of guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And then you also have Stuart Skinner, who he didn't come out of nowhere, but he wasn't anywhere near as good last season. He comes up and now he's #6. So he's improving in the right direction. You can probably get some value on him this year. He may or may not be counted as an Elite G1, depending on how you factor it. But if we expand that to a top 20 list for each season, which is pretty much on the screen, there are 24 goalies who only appear 1 time on this list of 3 seasons combined. That means 40% of the top 20 goalies each season were one-offs and probably weren't drafted to be G1s, and they rocketed up the board. So that's what we're factoring in here as we start to think about strategy throughout this process. 40% of these guys came out of nowhere and ended up in the top 20 goaltenders rankings at the end of the year. So what does this mean for our strategy this year? Do you actually need one of these elite goalies? That brings me to a little bit of a painful exercise here. You can see this is our the Fantasy Puck Creators League, and this was a league set up by the Fantasy Puck guys, featuring 12 of the top fantasy hockey content creators. And you'll notice your boy down here at #8, after making a huge mistake taking Tage Thompson at 14th, and injuries to Aiden Hill, Jack Hughes, and a laundry list of other excuses. But what you should notice is how Nate crafted his team. He obviously won by a pretty considerable margin in the regular season. Daily Dose had a pretty good regular season team as well, but Nate ended up winning the championship. And if you look at his team, his first goalie off the board, I believe, was Philip Grubauer in the 12th round. But if you look at what he's got at the end of the year, Freddie Anderson, 13th round, Jonas Korpisalo, who was playing for Ottawa, in the 15th round, and he obviously picked up Charlie Lindgren off of waivers. He was one of the best goaltenders through stretches last year. So This is interesting to look at because you do have a starter on a good defensive team picked super late, probably because of injury risk. You have Charlie Lindgren, who is really good at stretches, but a guy picked off the waiver wire, and kind of a, throwing a dart at the dartboard with Jonas Korpisalo, a starter who's going to get him volume, but obviously not on a great team, and he didn't necessarily have a great season. So as we saw earlier, you're very likely to be disappointed in your goaltending no matter where you get them. So the strategy that Nate uses, which is the 0G strategy, favors taking elite offensive players at every point in the draft up until maybe the 12th or 13th round, and then punting goaltending. Now, I believe that this works especially well in points leagues where all things are kind of evened out by the point weighting. When you compare that to a categories league, things are a little bit different because you usually have 4 out of your 10 categories, or at least a significant number of your categories, that are dedicated specifically to goaltending. So punting those is a little bit more risky, as you have to ensure that you win all 6 of your offensive or peripheral categories to win each week. So knowing all of this, what is the strategy? What are your options this year? What am I trying to get to here? So here's the idea. If you pick between first and third pick, or 10th or 12th pick in a 12-team league, basically the front end or the back end of the snake, use the 0G strategy and try to pick up a tandem on a good defensive team. Now, this works if you're in a categories league or a points league because you can basically get 2 of those guys on a really good defensive team. There's a couple of guys we'll get to as we look at the goalie hub in a couple minutes, but this works especially well in points leagues, but you can also use this in a category league if you can get those 2 guys from the same team and they're on an elite defensive team. That will give you plenty of volume. You'll be able to still stream goalies off the waiver wire, and you can kind of reliably count on them to have good goals against, maybe have good save percentage, but at least get you wins. Wins are good for points leagues. Same thing for categories leagues. You're going to, chip away at that category every week if your team is playing 2 or 3 times a week. So this is what I'm recommending for if you're picking between first and third, or 10th and 12th, basically the front or the back end of the snake. If you pick in the middle of the snake, between 4 and 9, somewhere in that region, you may not be able to grab that tandem. You will probably need a goalie that can get you a lot of start volume. 55 plus is a nice place to kind of, start off in terms of what's a starter versus a 1A, 1B. And then this is basically the list of the elite goalies that we went over last time, or in the last couple slides. Now, if you're in a points league, you may want to fade this entire list of goaltenders, because what we just saw with Nate's team, he started picking his goalies in the 12th round. He ended up with guys in the 13th and the 15th round and a guy off the waiver wire. So this may not work for you if you're in a points league. But if you're in a categories league and you've got 4 out of your 10 categories that are reliant upon good goaltending, and you want that safety blanket, you want that consistency, these are the guys to go for. But the strategy that I'm advocating for this year is to pick the last goalie of this group. So when we look at their ADPs, this will show you how these guys rank based on where they're going right now. And I would queue up anybody below this range, 38 plus. It depends on if you want to go Demko. Demko is obviously an injury risk. If he's healthy, he's going to be great. If he's not, that's going to be risky. And you're going to have to plan your G2 around whether or not you pick Demko. If you pick him, you're probably going to want a G2 with some start volume. And I would definitely look for that guy in that 12th, 13th round range. And we'll look at that later in the video. And then Linus Ullmark, a little bit of a question mark, going to a worse team defensively, going to a new team for the first time in a couple years, and his 3-year average is based off of his performance with Boston. But other than those 2 guys, I would queue up these guys here and pick whoever is still left on the board last. So this gives you an Elite G1 that you can rely upon, but it gives you that G1 at the most discounted ADP of the entire draft. So you're getting the best value, the best bang for your buck, and you're still, rounding out your forward group and your defense before you pick up that goaltender. So you're still going to have that lethal offense, which is what's going to carry you to your championship in fantasy. But how does this group stack up in terms of their 3-year average rating? So we're going to pair these guys up and look at that using the Data Draft Goalie Hub, which again, you can find an access to in the Patreon link in the description below. So what you see on the left, you got the player name, the ADP they're going at right now, the 3-year average rating that they've been at, or using the Data Draft Goalie Hub over the last couple of years. And then you got this this nice graph checking their rating over time. So you can see Hellebuck here. He's been as high as a 93. He's dipped a little bit the next season, dipped a lot, but still has been really consistent in this 80 to 93 range. And even if he does regress, if he goes back to an 89, you're still probably going to find some value there. You're getting a ton of volume. You're getting a ton of wins, excellent goals against and save percentage, 5 shutouts, tons of save volume, and 100th percentile in goals saved above expected. Team defense is really good as well. That's what you would expect. So Hellebuyck, very safe pick. I wouldn't take that because of the strategy that we're going with this year, just based on ADP, but a lot of these guys should be safe picks. And if you want to go that route, these are the guys to target. You also have UC Saros here. This team should be much improved, and he kind of had an off year last year. If you look at a 906 save percentage, that's a little bit uncharacteristic for him, but you're getting 64 starts. They still don't really have a backup that's going to challenge him for starts. 35 wins, really high save volume. That was basically due to the young nature of their team, and they didn't have the best back end. As you can see here, 56 percentile, not the best, not the worst. And then a little bit below expected, which is not what you come to expect from UC Saros. So this is ripe for a bounce back up into this 80s range at least. He was there the previous 3 seasons. He should be back there. Bobrovsky, if you watch this channel, you know I'm not a huge fan, and the reason is because of this variance. You can see his lows, 55, 53, but his highs are equally impressive. So 91, 84, he's all over the map. He's a 79, 55, 53, 84, 69, 91. There's no telling what he's going to do from year to year. They've lost some pieces on that back end. I'm not going to go to Bobrovsky just based on, the history and everything that I've talked about on this channel in the years past, but he had an excellent season last year. There's no getting around it. He was incredible. Tons of wins, excellent goals against and save percentage. That's pretty much his max save percentage. He's not going to do much better than that. Even in the year where he got the Vezina, he was around a 920. He wasn't necessarily a 930 guy. 6 shutouts, really good team defense last year. We'll see how that pans out this year. And at 38, you could do a lot worse. That's a pretty decent ADP. You talk about Shesterkin, nice, steady increase year to year. This is why he's one of the safe picks, him and Hellebuyck. Even less variance year to year and a nice steady upward trend. That's why Shesterkin is typically going at ADP 16.8 in that second round range. Tons of wins, not as much start volume, but still a starter in Elite G1. And then you've got the save percentage was the lowest of his career. He can bounce up to a 930, 935 at his best. So this, I wouldn't necessarily consider a bounce back. He's still trending in the right direction, but a very safe pick nonetheless. Vasilevsky, obviously trending downward over the last couple of seasons. You know what you used to get out of him these 3 seasons, but it's been a far cry from that basically since they lost McDonough. They got McDonough back in the offseason, but they have lost other pieces. So it'll be interesting to see how their team defense fares. Their 44th percentile last year, they probably are going to be around there, somewhere near the 50th percentile this year. But this should bounce back up into this 80s range. This was his low in the route, the low to mid 80s. And he dropped off to a 65 last year. So I would definitely expect regression back up. At 38.7, that's probably the second lowest ADP you're ever going to find him at. Last year, I got him at around 55, which was crazy. So this is a nice value play if you're interested in Vasilevsky and you've never owned him before. Sorokin, same type of thing, had a down year from an 85 to a 68. He should be primed for a bounce back. I don't know how good their defense is going to be. They were a very good defensive team. Patrick Waugh comes in. They were playing at almost, I believe it was over 100-point pace since Patrick Waugh came in. So that should be music to your ears if you're looking to target Sorokin. And at 42, that's a pretty decent ADP to get him. Allmark at this range, this is baking in a lot of Boston. So here is where he got traded to Boston. You can see everything trending super high for those 3 years. And then last year took a little bit of a dip, but still pretty good. 40 games, 22 wins, 915, 2 shutouts. Nice goals saved above expected. You've come to expect that from him. But now he's coming to a new team with a much worse defense. Or maybe not much worse, a little bit worse defense. They're definitely not Boston. So it'll be interesting to see how this works. But I would definitely say the games are going to come up. The wins will probably stay at around a 50% win percentage or thereabouts. And then the goals against will probably come up. The save percentage might go down. I don't know what to think of the shutouts. I don't know how that's going to work. Goals saved above expected should stay pretty consistent. Team defense, we'll have to wait and see. Ottinger, a lot of the same stuff from him. They're a very good defensive team. They did have to make some changes in the offseason. They lost Suter. They brought in Matt Dumba. They've made some changes, up front as well, losing Joe Pavelski, but he's been trending up kind of like Shesterkin over the last couple of years. He's young, coming into his prime. I would not worry about him at all. This save percentage was a little bit low, but I would expect a little bit more from him. You know what to expect from Jeremy Swayman. Excellent goaltending over the last couple of years, 916 last year, 18 goals saved above expected. Team defense dropped off a little bit last year, but they used to be one of the elite defenses in the league, and they are a relatively complete blue line. They're getting a little bit of center help with Lindholm coming in, so that could potentially help them defensively, stay out of their zone a little bit more. This should be a pretty safe pick at 27, but again, these ADPs for these guys, 24, 26, 27, 28, that's 4 goalies going in the late second, early third round, depending on your league size. You got Shesterkin in the second round. That's too rich for the data draft strategy. I'm not going to go there. Demko is the guy, as I mistakenly clicked Jari, Demko is the guy that we have to talk about because these variances are crazy. 42, 48, 46, these are his lows, and that's usually when he's injured. When he's healthy, he's elite level, and we know that. So 918 last year, 5 shutouts, tons of save volume, goals saved above expected off the charts. Team defense was much better than in years past. Rick Tocchet has gotten that under control. If he's healthy, he's a very elite level goaltender, and he might be the last guy out of this list that you can get simply because of that injury risk. That's the problem. Is he going to be injured? So if you're going to go out and get Thatcher Demko, I would highly advise that you go somewhere in the 9th to 12th or 13th round range and get another starter. So maybe not a 1A, 1B guy, but a guy who's going to get you some volume just in case Thatcher Demko is not ready for your team at the start of the season, or if he's in and out of the lineup, injured at any point. You want to have that safety net as a guy that you can throw in there and not have to worry about volume, and then you can stream goalies off the wire to get you some of the other stats that you need. But this is the risk that you have to take because Demko is elite level when he's healthy. It's just a matter of how healthy will he be this year. Now here's an outlier for you. Tristan Jarry, 147 ADP. And Nedeljkovic, we saw in the ADP video, has been rocketing up the boards as we've gotten real people into these drafts. You can see here a little bit of variance, 63, 58, up to an 80, down to a 62, up to a 70. He's usually very good in shutouts. For whatever reason, he has those games where he's incredible, but his consistency is the problem. 903 save percentage, not great. Team defense is mid-pack, not terrible. He's above expected technically and does see a lot of rubber, so you should get some of those. He did start 51 games, but he did also lose the net towards the end of the year to Nedeljkovic. So this would be a guy, I mean, it's difficult to say that you should pair Thatcher Demko with Tristan Jarry, 2 injury-prone guys, but this is a guy that could be a starter later on in your draft, way later in the ADPs. This is just another high-risk, high-reward play, but if you're going to take that risk, you might as well take it in the 12th round, which is right about where Tristan Jarry's going. Now, Stuart Skinner, he's been rocketing up these boards basically since he came into the league. 23, 59, 71, 79. The starts have been there. Campbell obviously left. He took the net over from Campbell. Pickard's the backup. He's going to continue to get starts. The wins should obviously be there. The goals against should be there because of this team defense, and the total saves should be there. The save percentage isn't great. The goals saved above expected isn't great, but this looks really nice for points leagues where you're getting extra points for wins. Maybe shutouts will come up a little bit just based on the team exposure. The team defense is really good, so this would be a guy I would look at in a points league more than a categories league because he's not going to put up that elite save percentage, or at least he hasn't yet. But this is a guy that could also be a fringe Elite G1, depending on how you classify it. He's been trending in the right direction. He has stayed relatively healthy. He's just not the most skilled goaltender in terms of raw skill. Guys like Saros and Hellebuck and Shesterkin all have those technicals that are a little bit better than Stuart Skinner, but he is still really big, covers a lot of net, and he's playing on a really good team. And he played really well last year, and he obviously got his team within 1 goal of the Stanley Cup. Now, there's a couple of other guys. We can touch on a couple of these guys. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but Anderson, if he's healthy, elite level. 932 save percentage, 184 goals against, goals saved above expected, really good. Team defense, obviously excellent. It's just the health. Do you know if he's going to be healthy? Well, last year, Nate from Apples and Ginos didn't know that he was going to be healthy. He picked him anyway, and he won his championship. So when he's in your lineup, he's going to be very effective. If you can count on streaming goalies off the wire, you might as well pick up Anderson, especially at ADP 80, because you're getting a guy on a usually good defensive team. They did make some changes in the offseason. We'll have to see how that goes, but he usually is putting up 920 or better save percentage. The goals against is obviously going to be really low. The starts should be around the 50 range if he's healthy, but Kochetkov is knocking on the door to potentially take that number 1 spot, but Anderson's been so good when he's been in, it's hard to give the net to Kochetkov in that case. Now, I'm just going to touch on Georgiev really quick because he had a terrible season last year. He was a guy kind of like Skinner on a good team, tons of starts, 63 starts, 38 wins, and a ton of save volume. But the .897 save percentage was awful. 302 goals against, not great. Team defense was actually not great last year. They were missing guys for various stretches. They didn't put it all together in terms of eliminating high danger chances, and Georgiev was not at his best last year, that's for sure. And we will get to his backup a little bit closer to the end of this video. But next I want to show you some of the other targets that you can get. So let's look at the 9th round range and beyond. So ADP 96 and beyond. And these are some guys that you can get. We've gone over Jari. We'll start with Darcy Kemper. He's been going downhill for a while, but he's a starter that you can get on a really good defensive team now. Obviously, he had a terrible season last year. He's been trending down basically 4 out of the last 5 years. So there's not a lot of confidence that he is going to turn this around, but there is a little bit of like, how low can he go? He's got to bounce back up to somewhere. And if he bounces up into this mid 60s range, he'll probably be value at 104 ADP. He might even drop a little bit further than that, but he's at least a bona fide starter who's going to get you that volume in LA on a good defensive team, who's going to win some games in that Pacific Division. So this should be a guy that if you're fading goaltenders until past the 9th round, using sort of that 0G strategy, he could be a target for you. Now, if you're going to go with that 0G strategy and try to use the tandem, I'm definitely looking at the Washington tandem. Logan Thompson, 908 save percentage, 2.7 goals against, 25 wins in only 46 starts. Really decent season last year, and he had another good season a couple years ago. He had a little bit of a down year. He was in and out of the lineup, a little bit injured in the past couple seasons, but coming over to a relatively good defensive team, this is a little bit lower, but they added Matt Roy, they added Jacob Chikrin. They should be a little bit better defensively this year. They just couldn't score last year, and they did add a little bit more up front, so that could relieve some pressure, get them out of their defensive zone a little bit more. And then you look at Charlie Lindgren, who Nate also had on his team, and look at the difference, 49 up to a 77. This is one of those guys who came out of nowhere and took over the net in Washington. 911 save percentage, 2.67 goals against. Really nice there. 50% win percentage, 25 wins in 50 games. Good save volume, well above expected. And again, I think that team defense does come up this year. This would be a tandem that I'm targeting if I'm at the front or the back end of the snake. You're getting at 147, 153 ADP. That's about the 12th round. I would reach a little bit if you're looking to target these guys just to make sure that you do get them. Now, in terms of starters, you do have Cam Talbot there, but the team defense much worse in Detroit than it was in LA. And when he didn't have that team defense in LA, he was kind of, all over the map, down to a 32, 55, up to a 73. I believe that was with Edmonton, back down to a 61, to a 48. So a lot of variance. That's why he's going at ADP 160. If you're going to throw darts at the dartboard and use the 0G strategy and look for that deeper ADP starter target. So let's say you went after Demko and you want that other starter. Talbot should get some of that start volume in Detroit. They do have like 7 goalies on their roster, so that is interesting to note. There's a couple guys, Ville Husso, Alex Lyon. These are guys further down the list. Lyon not ranked. Husso, I don't know why he is ranked. He hasn't necessarily been good in a couple of years, but these are guys that you could target if you're looking for those G1s. Forsberg, I don't know what to make of. He didn't really have the best season last year or the other year, but he was, I believe, top 10 in this 22 season, but he's going to be playing behind Allmark, so I don't really like that. Brossoit has been excellent, playing in a couple different spots, both Vegas and in Winnipeg. He should be a really reliable backup. He won't be healthy to start the season. 927 save percentage, 2.0 goals against, and he's going to get a ton of save volume playing for Chicago. Now, if you think about Peter Mrazek, who's going a little bit earlier than this, he's not in this list because he's going around the 80 range. I think that's way too early for Mrazek. But Mrazek had a really good season last year, despite the fact that their team defense was terrible. So with that said, Brossoit could do a lot of the same in terms of save percentage and total save volume. If you're in a league that weighs total saves as like 1 point per save, that could be where you could get some value on him. We can look at Jordan Binnington as well. So going up, a nice trend here for the 3 seasons previous, then a huge drop off, and then retrending back up. So it's nice to see him battling back and coming back into fantasy relevance. 57 games, 28 wins, 913 is really nice, 3 shutouts, and they weren't the best team last year. So I don't know how improved they're going to be. They didn't do a ton in the offseason. I don't know if this defense is getting any better. and I've never really liked Binnington as a fantasy goalie, but you're definitely getting start volume out of him. And the save percentage has come back up in the most recent years. Previously, he was around a 900, and I didn't want any part of that. But just another option for you if you're looking for that starter. But again, switching back to the tandem options, there's two tandems that I want to go over, and that is Minnesota's tandem. Gustafsson had a huge drop-off last year, and he's done this before where he's dropped off, but then he rocketed back up, and this season he was top 10, as we saw earlier in this video. He had almost a 930 save percentage that season and was incredible in limited sample size. And Marc-Andre Fleury's getting older. He's not necessarily going to get another 40 games this year, I couldn't imagine, especially with that save percentage and that low below expected. The team defense is still really good at 75th percentile. Both of these guys are going 13th round plus. So if you're trying to get that tandem, I would definitely look at Washington. Minnesota's even better defensively, so maybe they're the better option in terms of a tandem. But Gustafsson has that one season last year, or not last year, but the year before that, where he was excellent. And this is ripe for regression back up into this range, maybe 70, 75, maybe not a 79, but the elite ceiling is there for you if you want to take that risk. And this is very risk-free at this point in the draft. You might as well do it if you're pushing goalies all the way back and using that 0G strategy. Now, another option for you is this tandem in Utah. Connor Ingram trending massively over the last 3 seasons. 907 is not that great, but look at the team defense he was playing behind. Now they bring over Sergachev, they add Marino, so they've bolstered their D a little bit. They should be better overall. They were close to a playoff team last year. They're projected to be a bubble team this year. 291 goals against, not bad. 6 shutouts, so if you're in a points league that weighs those heavier, that's pretty nice to see. Well above expected. 50 starts last year. And then you look at Vejmelka. He was a guy 2 years ago who was the starter there, and Ingram was the up-and-coming backup, and then they kind of reverse roles. So if they switch again and Ingram has a little bit of regression and Vejmelka comes back up, this could be a nice pick at 183. Really, I mean, you're just throwing, it's a low-risk, high-reward situation there if you're trying to get this tandem. I don't necessarily see them being an elite defensive team. However, you're getting two guys that have done pretty good things in the past in terms of save percentage, goals against, and goals saved above expected. Obviously, last year, things didn't go well for Vejmelka. Things did go well for Ingram, though. So these guys going at 133 and then 183, respectively, I wouldn't necessarily pair them together if the gap is that wide in terms of, going with the tandem. But you could wait on that. If you're not picking at the front of the back end of the snake, these could be good options for you as well. Obviously, Korpisalo coming to Boston, that should increase his value from a 47 back up somewhere in this mid-60s range. He did get a bunch of starts last year with Ottawa, didn't get a lot of wins, terrible save percentage and goals against, no shutouts, well below expected. But when he was on a good team in 2023 with LA, he was much, much better. Now, I don't think that he's going to take over for Swayman, but if for whatever reason Swayman is not signed and he's going through this contract holdout, he could be a nice depth option to start the year and give you some starts on a really good defensive team if that's what you're looking for, just to wait and bide your time until Swayman gets back. So Swayman going way higher, Korpisalo way at the bottom end of the draft, and that could provide some value. Now, again, not going to go over every one of these goalies, but some of these guys that we're talking about fit either one of these strategies that I've given in this video. And then I'll just leave you with 2 guys. One, Joey Decord last year. Look at this, from a 32 up to an 81. There should be regression there just based on data. Like, he's gone from a 30 to an 18 to a 32 and then just came out of nowhere and became a top 10 goalie in fantasy. That should regress, but their team defense is excellent. And honestly, I've given up on Philip Grubauer. He's been terrible for a number of years now. For some reason, his 3-year average is higher, but that's because he played with Colorado one of these years. If you look at the rest, 44, 51, 58, trending in the right direction, but really not the best goaltender. 899 save percentage last year, 286 goals against. He typically doesn't even get run support either. So Seattle's been starved for goals. They didn't really do a lot to address that. Hopefully Matty Beniers can pick it up this year, but with Grubauer not being a reliable fantasy option, Decord could be the starter. He started 50 games last year, and you could get a reliable starter on a good defensive team at 165 ADP. You could do a lot worse than that. Again, if you're picking a guy like Demko or Freddie Anderson earlier in the draft, you might want to pair him with a guy like Decord, who's low risk, high reward at this ADP. And then the last guy I wanted to touch on, and this is way down at the bottom, but this is Justus Annunen, who per game was one of the best goaltenders in fantasy last year. 928 save percentage, 2.14 goals against, 11.5 above expected. Excellent numbers, 8 wins and 14 starts. And as I turn it over to the per game custom ranking tool using the default Yahoo settings, and again, you can find the goalie hub that we just saw and this tool and the total points version of this tool in the Patreon link in the description below. But as we look at this is again default point weightings from Yahoo. Justus Annunen, number 3 overall behind McDavid. Now that's ridiculous. Obviously, he's not going to be number 3 overall in your league, but this just shows you on a per game level, he was absolutely dynamic last year, and this is an opportunity for him to potentially steal some starts from Georgiev, who was terrible last year. So if Georgiev comes out of the gate this year and doesn't look good again, they may give him 10, 15 games and then start to go to Annunen. So this could be a really low risk, high reward play at ADP 170. I would look at that if you're trying to get that 1B option on a really good team, maybe not a good defensive team, but a good team altogether. And this could be a really like swing for the fences kind of pick really late in your draft. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully I've encapsulated the strategy well. Hopefully I've given you the data that you need to succeed this year in your draft. If I did, leave a like, leave a comment in the comment section down below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.